Good morning to everyone. My name is Ravi Narayan, 1986 batch, Chemical Engineering, Saras Hostel. And I see some of my classmates have also joined me here. So, it's been a long time since I graduated from IIT Madras. I'm fortunate to be in India so I can go visit IIT often, and I also meet with a lot of IIT Madras alumni in Bangalore, in other parts of the country, and in the US. I was at Sangam last time and the time before that. So the association with IIT Madras is very strong. I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about the work that I'm doing, and it's something that I feel is a path that several of you can take as well in your careers, because there is the opportunity not only to build something of great value, but at the same time, it's also an opportunity for you to make a great impact through your work. So that's the purpose of getting us all together. And I have, as usual, cramped quite a bit into the 1 hour that I have here. But I hope to not only cover it, but also not leave you confused as to all these different things that are happening across India. So let me start by just giving you an introduction about the career that I've had, and then I'll get launch into the presentation. So I graduated from IIT Madras in '86, and I did chemical engineering, like many of you who have done engineering, but then decide to do something else. So really, in my career, I've not done much of chemical engineering since then. Uh, the good news was I got a great education, great set of friends, a great network. I also found my wife on the campus. She was not a fellow student, but she was the daughter of one of the professors. Interestingly, I took the class of the professor, and I didn't get a very good grade. And he said, you have a lot of things to improve. And now my wife has taken that to heart, and she's trying to improve me since that time. So it's been a very interesting association with IIT, not just from a alumni standpoint, but also being part of the campus family. So, one of the things that I was very interested in was to get into entrepreneurship. So, just like everybody else in my batch, we moved pretty much en masse to the US. We felt that's where the opportunities was much larger. I'm talking about 86, 87, right? Very few of us actually stayed back. I'm one of the ones who actually went and then came back as well. So the first thing is, I got an MBA degree thinking that it'll help me with my entrepreneurial ambitions. Interestingly, MBA was actually preparing you more for a corporate life and not necessarily for starting a company. But having gotten some of the tenets of the business figured out, I felt that maybe I can start a company. So within about 2 years of graduating with an MBA and a master's in industrial engineering, I started my first company, and it was a company mostly in the services space. So very much like TCS and Wipro. And those early days, we were actually building very very specifically for the federal government of the US. So I did a bunch of projects for Federal Aviation Administration, Department of Justice, and that being a very fungible business, we also got a buyer to buy out that business very quickly. So I moved on from there, and then went back to the normal corporate life for some time, but then very quickly came back out again and started my second company. And this second company was in the voice over IP space. And voice over IP at that time was very, very new. Uh, getting on a phone or getting onto a computer and talking to people, across the world was a very, very interesting technology that was just coming into its being. So along with another IIT Madras guy, 1 year junior to me, and another third person, we started a company in the voice over IP space. And this is a company that we wanted to build this product that was unique. Market was large and untapped. To get into taking the same data pipes that were transmitting, internet protocol, to actually also do voice over internet protocol was the opportunity. So we built this company very quickly. We raised $14 million, and then found out that the entire market that we were working on pretty much disappeared on us. So we had great technology, but we repurposed the technology to build yet another company out of it, and that's the company that really grew. We had 150 telecom providers, the likes of Reliance and Telecom, Airtel, NTT in Japan, Verizon in the US, and so on. So these were our customers in across the world. So we had 150 of them, and we got to sell the company eventually to another provider in Texas. Somewhere around that time, I got very excited about coming back to India, and I wanted to see if I could do my third company out of India. But also, having done two startups in the past, I felt, I don't need to necessarily take the same amount of time, go through the same set of steps. How about if I expedite this entire process by buying the intellectual property of another company from Silicon Valley that was doing something in the space I wanted to be in, and use that as a basis to sell to the new markets that were there. So this was in the metro core Ethernet switching, and a lot of Silicon Valley companies had raised tremendous amounts of money in this space, and they were on the block because their markets had evaporated, but the markets were actually here in India and in China. So taking the technology from there, applying it to markets here, looked like a very good fit. And what better than somebody who's been through this journey before to actually do this? And that's how I ended up acquiring this company, which was funded to about $110 million for much lesser than that, and then brought the entire technology to India and tried to build this up in Bangalore. What I found out very quickly, even though I had technology, I had market, uh, and I had some initial money from VCs, it was not really apparent that this company is going to go very far and be very successful, because it was a highly capital intensive organization, and the capital that came from VCs, we didn't have VCs, by the way, at that time. I came back in 2005, 2006 is when I started this company, and we really didn't have VCs actually knowing that, okay, this is going to be a 2 year haul or a 36-month haul to really get this company off the ground. So we had to continue to invest to make sure that it gets to where it's supposed to get to. So there was this conflict always with the investors as to whether this can be a long-term thing, or is it just an ROI, which is what the mindset was in India among its investors. So that's the insight. So obviously that startup didn't go very far. It got sold out for pennies on the dollar, and I decided that there's something that needs to be done about the ecosystem, and that's how I started this process of building one of the first micro VCs in India called Mentor Partners. And Mentor Partners actually took product companies in India who were building something of value in terms of intellectual property, not necessarily about services, which is what Infosys, Wipro, TCS had done so tremendously well, but really building something in anticipation of a market evolving, or an underserved market that needed a product. And we funded those companies. and we did about 12 companies. Eventually, we took those companies to the valley to get the next round of funding, and all that. Was a wonderful um, opportunity to bridge the gap and also create an ecosystem. And then eventually I ended up also helping Microsoft building their worldwide network across the world, in China, in Europe, in Israel, in the US and India, creating these contact uh, with the startups and helping the entire organization innovate. And now Microsoft for startups is a global brand, which was started. The journey started in 2012. So that's kind of a I wanted to give you a sense of my own journey. So from being an entrepreneur to a VC to now an ecosystem builder, I think I have a fair amount of understanding of how this is done. So I actually now dive into building ecosystems rather than any specific startups or funding only specific things. I do that on a personal basis, but as a profession, as an institutionalized way, I try to build ecosystems, nowadays, and therefore these ecosystems in turn create economies, innovation economies, and so on. So that's kind of a quick background. I will get into a presentation now. I just wanted to make a quick housekeeping request that if you have any questions, please post them in the questions uh, bar and not in the chats, so it doesn't get mixed up. And if you can just post it there, I'll try and answer as many of them as I can. So with that, I will share with you my presentation. Okay, so that's a quick introduction about myself. So right now I'm the CEO of this organization called THub. So THub is a very unique organization because it's about building an ecosystem. It's about working with startups, it's about working with corporates, it's about working with investors, it's about working with academia and also the government. And you would say, well, this is a very complicated thing. But what we have in IIT Madras, for example, the technology part pretty much does things like this as well. So it's not a unique thing. If you go back to, say, Silicon Valley, for example, why is Silicon Valley so successful or was successful, before we went into the COVID era? Well, the reason it was because there was, Stanford and Berkeley as academia that was really generating some very, very, disruptive innovations. There were investors all the way from angel investors to VCs to PEs, all there. There were corporates, as in these large companies who could potentially be the uh, the customers of startups, wanting to be associated with startups that were actually establishing themselves there, and they were actually buying from these startups. And then there was the government, not only from a policy standpoint but also being a big consumer of technology. And imagine if they were to actually say, for my e-governance I would like to acquire from uh, startups, or various other things that they would do, buy from startups. That would be a wonderful thing. So corporates and government are like the demand side of innovation. Startups and academia are the supply side of innovation, all the way from technology itself to also entrepreneurs to come into the ecosystem, and so on and so forth. And the investors are people who help build this economy. So we deal with all of them, and we feel that if they are actually looking to build anything of value, anything that is of a innovation quotient that's much much higher than where they are today, then THub wants to be that organization to help them, to enable them, and to empower them. Is the way we have positioned ourselves. So we are at the epicenter of a an ecosystem where we do a whole variety of things. So what we do is we work with startups uh, who are, let's say, very early stage. Incubation 50 lakhs is the annual revenue run rate. We bring them in, We work with them. We get them to a point where they can actually raise Series A. That's the acceleration set of programs. And then once they're gotten Series A and they're ready to scale, they go into the scaling programs. So, the entire life cycle of a startup can be actually mapped through all the different programs at Startup Innovation. So this is the supply side of innovation. So we also work with IIT Hyderabad and IIIT Hyderabad in terms of collaboration on technology and so on and so forth for all these different programs. So you see that there is innovation coming from various different places. Uh, but at the same time, we are spending even more amount of time with the corporate side, and we feel this is very, very important. So it's great to build fantastic technology, but what if nobody buys that the technology from you, the products from you? Then the startups is just a great idea that you guys had a great time. It's a hobby, worked out. It's nothing some the where you really were able to make an impact in the ecosystem, make an impact in the market, and therefore was able to really capture that opportunity that presented to you as entrepreneurs. So we have corporate innovation as the demand side of innovation. We have, of course, gradations, just like we have in the startup side, gradations as to emerging as very early stage. People are beginning to understand what startups are all about, and so on and so forth. So the entrepreneurs amongst you may have run into this, where you think you have a fantastic, innovation, but when you go talk to somebody that can really, really use it in a corporation, their face is completely blank. That excitement that you have is not shared by them, right? So we try to create that awareness, that sensitization amongst them to actually do the right thing for themselves, and then for the startups, which is the emerging part. And then once they're ready to give you a problem statement, and you're ready to build a POC, then that's a coordinated. And if they're now beginning to build products, which is a combination of their own engineers building some pieces of it, and then startups building the peripheral pieces or some of the other pieces that they wouldn't have wanted to build by themselves. That is transformative and disruptive, is when they are rethinking their entire strategy going forward. So that is the demand side of the innovation that we are creating. And the last thing that we also focus on is what we call as ecosystem office, which is about capacity building, international programs, taking some of the top startups from India to outside of India, and top startups outside of India wanting to come to the Indian markets, the international programs, and so on. So it's a very holistic view of building this ecosystem, and we have seen some tremendous progress happening since the beginning of THub. It was about 400 startups. Today, there's more than 2,000 startups, and many of them are beginning to, raise tremendous amounts of money, which is an indicator of how well they are doing. We also had a unicorn coming out of Hyderabad just recently, an IIT Madras graduate. So it's all wonderful things, happen when you are kind of not letting things happen in the silos, but bringing them all together and helping them grow in a much more concerted way. So this is kind of the THub story, and it's something that you may have heard bits and pieces of. So it's like, I'm trying to tell you about the entire elephant, when some people have touched one part of the elephant and thought this is what it was, and somebody else touched the another part of the elephant and thought it was something else. But here is the holistic view of what we are doing, and to some extent all of this is happening at the technology park at IIT Madras as well. But this is an initiative that has caught the attention of a lot of the global players. That so I'm happy to say that I was, myself and a few other IITians are also involved in making this thing happen. So it's a very, very exciting thing to not just do something disruptive in the ecosystem space, but also help individual startups and help VCs and so on and so forth in the process. And several of them, thankfully, are also IITians, so it's more a personal connection than the professional connection. So this is one part of the story I wanted to um, you know give you, because this is something that is very mainstream. You see it in Economic Times, you see it in Mint, you see a lot of Young Turks kind of a thing on TV. So this is not some very different for you. So what I will do is I will ask Rakesh if he can just run the poll one, which is regarding the Global Innovation Index of India. Do you see a poll on your screen? Great. Yeah. So this is something that's a well understood story, which was in 2006 was a very new thing. Not too many startups in India and so on and so forth. Today we have the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. And post this COVID, I'm hoping that we will accelerate even more, given that there is so much that is changing, and the world order in terms of pecking order in terms of innovation will also start changing. So the answer to the poll is that India is number 52 on the Global Innovation Index, and that's not a real reflection of what India is all about. India is more than what happens uh, in the in the main cities. It's actually what happens in the hinterlands as well. So the other organization that I lead in Telangana is called the Telangana State Innovation Cell. And this is a very unique initiative because this is where we focus not just on startups, which are there also happening in the villages and districts of the state, but we also are looking to work with the students, with the entire culture of innovation, and the government itself. So imagine there is a a person who is looking to get an education, and they feel that they're going to get a job, but we are saying, how do we insert uh, innovation as a curriculum, innovation as a thought process into the student community? So we do a lot of work around schools and colleges to really inculcate this whole innovation thing, because we feel that India, as much as we can solve some problems using the venture back model of startups, that will probably address only about 15% to 20% of the opportunities or problems that we have in India. There are about 30% of them that do not make any commercial sense, that most of these will actually get solved by the government or governmental bodies, foundations, and so on and so forth. So really 55% of the middle is actually going to be solved by a lot of the social and grassroots innovation kind of activities, and that's what we want to really build out. And India requires a lot of these, solving for water, solving for education, solving for healthcare, all energy, clean energy. All of this has to be done in a much more fundamental way. It has to be done by innovators that are sitting in the village, in the district level, and so on and so forth. So how do we really bring this innovation culture is what we spend a lot of time on. And of course, you know, getting this large organization called the government to actually become a consumer of this innovation is where we spend a lot of time also in educating the government officials and all that, and being part of this. So I won't go to the details, but I just wanted to let you know that we work very much in the schools, in the district innovation ecosystem. A whole lot of programs have been launched. Tremendous amount of impact has been created, and basically we have about 4,000 students, 200 teachers, eight government schools have been impacted so far in the last year and a half of our work, 2 years of work. Um, we also work on the Hyderabad innovation ecosystem, the rural innovation ecosystem, and also promote these innovations. So one is for them to be found, and it's another for them to be exposed to the general public, so that people see that these people are actually solving problems. So I'll give you an interesting example. So there's this gentleman called Narsimachari. He saw that there was a lot of these tube lights that were being thrown away after their use, and he felt that this was a huge waste, because one, disposing tube lights the way they were being disposed, with the glass breaking, was not the most uh, optimal way of doing it. But in addition to that, there was also a lot of life left in these tube lights, so there was a sheer waste of things that were happening here. So he actually has devised a way to bring these tube lights back to life, and it doesn't require these two leads on each side. There's only one lead is good enough. You are able to just hook up the wire to it with one innovation that he has created, which will then compensate for the other pin, and then bring this life, this tube light back to life in another 10 years of life. So this is a person who doesn't know English, didn't have a formal education, but had the ability to say, well, there is a problem here, I want to solve it. And he got into figuring out where these solutions are going to come from, and he solved it for them. So we actually do a lot of these scouting, and working with these innovators. And then, of course, we work with all the startups, innovators, incubators all across the uh, state. So here we have worked more than 100 innovators. A lot of them have been also helped to create intellectual property rights around it, and now we are now helping them build their micro and small and medium industries, for themselves. Um, One second. Okay. All right. The third mandate is to work with the government, which I should say is the hardest of the things that we have done, but also fulfilling when you see that the government starts becoming part of this entire journey, not just helping in terms of financial this thing, but they also become consumers of these innovations. So we worked with several of them, and now we're happy to say that all the different 33 districts in the state are working with some kind of innovation or the other, and lots of successful collaborations across all the fields. Um, so one of the things that we use to see how good we are doing is, if we are doing these programs ourselves for different people, then obviously it's good, and a lot of the things happen that way. But it's not sustainable, because every time we have to be there to make things happen, and only things happen. Uh, so what we really like to see is, other than our own pieces, if we are able to enable other people, other partners to do innovation with us, then you see a scale, and that is the next level. So this is the Ashoka Fellowship framework. And then the third one is where we have created such a systemic change that lots of people are now beginning to think differently, act differently, and so on and so forth. And then finally, we are creating an entire paradigm shift. So we have done different programs under each one of these categories. But what is even more fulfilling for us is that a lot of these guys are now moving to the right, which means that from direct, they're going to scale direct. The scale direct are becoming systemic changes. Systemic changes are becoming framework changes. So, uh, you know, our need to go push to make things happen continually is reducing. We can go back and do more stuff now, and we don't need to be involved in making things happen. So there is that multiplier effect that we are creating in the ecosystem. So the interesting thing about all this I wanted to bring to your attention is that this is done by fellows, as in people who are not necessarily full-time employees or experts in this area that have been trained someplace else and have come back. No, these are people that are you know very, very passionate about wanting to make an impact in India, make an impact in their state. They want to really, frame the problems that they want to solve for in this large space that I just talked to you about: school, government, innovation, culture. And they will frame the problems and they will solve for them. And these are people who are currently in their 20s. So we are not encumbering them with any training where they have to go by the training that we are given them. We actually give them some of the frameworks, but we pretty much let them go and figure things out on their own. And so we do this with this highly uh, motivated, highly passionate, highly very, very smart individuals who actually want to make a difference. And they come in, so they may have a regular career that they are doing, but somewhere along the way they may say, I want to take a year and 2 years, just go do something different which really makes an impact, really makes a change in my state, my country. I want to go, and in the process, of course, learn a lot. And it's a very fulfilling thing. So we are actually looking for the next uh, generation of fellows that we can come and work with us. So the so this one has we have 9 out of the 17 initiatives have moved to the next level. So that's a great thing for us. So coming back to this, so this is the way you can actually apply for it. 10th of May is the last date. So this is something that I got very, very excited by, because I took a very traditional career path. I went to the US like everybody else, tried to establish myself in a career, and then try to make a living, and slowly built up, which this is what happens most of the time. But then there's also a time that you stop and think, okay, am I really uh, using my potential for everything that I'm capable of? And when you start reflecting on this, or are you making enough of an impact, then you want to kind of see, okay, what are the opportunities that are available in the US? Some people say, I want to go do public service or Greenpeace or things like that. There are not too many of them here, but they're beginning to appear. And we feel that this may be a unique opportunity for a lot of you who may be considering this, or ask somebody else who is considering this, to actually take some time off from your career path and say, okay, can I do something of of great significance? I chanced upon it much later in my career, but there's no reason for you to do wait until then, because now they are popping up all over the place. So this is one thing that I would urge you to look into. uh, the other thing that I would like to also say is that IIT Madras Alumni Association itself is doing a phenomenal job in creating innovations for Bharat. This is the program that Krishnan Narayanan, who is the Vice President of IITMAA, he's leading this effort. He's also on this call. But the whole thought process there is, reconnect, engage, and impact, right? Getting you to connect back, engage with the community, and actually create an impact. So that's kind of the process which they are creating. And this is very similar to what I said about TSIC. They want to create these opportunities for the alumni to make this thing happen. So while I talk to you about TSIC itself directly, but TSIC is also listed as one of the beneficiaries through this Innovation for Bharat program. Besides TSIC, you also have eGov and Argyam, who are also listed as partners. So if you go to iitmark.org, Innovation for Bharat, you will find TSIC also. So you can apply through that route, or you can come directly to TSIC and apply. I think this is a very, very unique thing that we have going on in India today. I think as IITians, making a career, or making a living is not something that we should be worried about. We also have the ability to do much more than that. And here is something that you can do with TSIC or through IITMAA, working with TSIC. So I just wanted to leave you with this, and give you something to think about, because there's so much exciting things that are happening. So I wanted to run a second poll here. COVID is actually upon us, and lots of things are happening, and we are in lockdown, so we don't really know how we're going to emerge out of it. But um, I wanted to get your sense about, you know, what does COVID mean for India? Is it going to increase innovation, decrease innovation, or you think, it's just going to remain the same? So I wanted you guys to just take a poll. There's no right or wrong answer, but my contention as an optimist, as an entrepreneur, as a ecosystem builder, is that it actually will change the world order for us. I think there's a lot of interesting things that are emerging in India. India is embracing innovation, embracing entrepreneurship in a very big way. And when I had this, meeting with the Minister for Commerce some time ago, one of course the meeting for 95%, 97% of the time was all about how do we deal with this issue, how do we keep the startups alive, how do we get the VCs to be, looking at more deals and so on and so forth. But the last 3% of the time was actually spent on what opportunity does this crisis open for us, and how do we really take advantage of this and leapfrog, the entire world order in entrepreneurship and innovation and so on and so forth. I think it's a huge opportunity for us. The people who smell the opportunities first, uh, build their solutions for those opportunities quickly, are the ones who are going to really really succeed. This applies to entrepreneurs, applies to innovators, it applies to us as a country. And that's why I'm thinking that this is a great time for us to be having this conversation. And I will um, pause here and see if there are any questions. Let me take this thing off the screen. Did it get shared? Okay. All right. So I'll start answering the questions. I guess I'll have to read them, and then how can students get a more fearless entry into entrepreneurship in India as a career option? I think a lot of this, Rajeshwari, is fundamental to the nature that we bring up our kids. I know that when I was growing up, getting a mainstream career and making enough money for myself and raising a family was an important thing. But more and more now shows that one going off the well-trodden path into entrepreneurship is being more and more accepted. Uh, the way the fathers-in-law, mothers-in-law, are happy to say, oh, okay, he doesn't work for Infosys, but he works for a startup, and that's acceptable. For giving their daughter away in marriage is now becoming more and more commonplace. A lot of organizations such as TSIC, NEN, uh, you know, and Badwani Foundation and others are actually trying to incorporate a lot of entrepreneurship, into the curriculum itself, so people get an exposure. They can do this learning, or they can participate in hackathons and get a chance to say, okay, what can I do with all the knowledge and what all the capabilities that I have? So I think it's there to answer. Okay, so I think I hope that answers your question. Um, Next one is from Raghav Talwar. Um, Sir, like you said, that VCs in India are relatively less patient about their ROIs. Then how should people with capital and R&D intensive startups ideas go about seeking funding while also sustaining their personal expenses meanwhile? Good question. See, this is an evolving thing. There's no right or wrong answer, or there's no time where we can force these things to happen. uh, VCs are becoming much more of venture capitalists, which their name suggests. Over time, lots of people, if you can imagine, when I started in 2006, I was a VC for the first time in my life, but I had never been a VC or not worked for a VC firm before. So I was also learning, and I was also being cautious, and not taking, very very large chances. But now, over a period of time, people have begun to take those chances and participate. But one thing, Raghav, you should also be very sure about is that you know there is a graded way of getting to VCs. VCs are not the only ways of getting, investments. So you can start with a small amount of money coming in from friends and family, then you go into angels, then you go to seed investors, then you go into VCs, then you go into later stage VCs. So the whole market of investments is a very nuanced one. It is not something that you can say, hey, I want to talk to a VC. Any investor is not a VC, and and a VC may not be appropriate for you at any time. At the time that you want to raise money. Lots of our alumni are VCs across India and the US, and of course in other parts of the world. So if you were able to get some time from them using this IIT connection, do speak to them, not for money, for advice. I can assure you that you will learn a lot about what the viability of the startup that you're doing, the products that you're building, how quickly you can take it to market, and a lot of these things you will get to know. And they may even point you to who may be the right person to talk to at this point of your journey to raise the money. Yeah. Next one is, are there any startups in THub exclusively around ML and AI in THub? If so, what is their journey so far? Yeah, so we are fortunate that we are in the Triple IT campus. Triple IT has one of the world-class group of scientists, researchers in AI ML, so we have access to them. But THub itself has a lot of AI ML startups. And in fact, if you don't have AI ML, it's not sexy enough to do a startup anymore. I'm just joking. You don't need to do that. But yeah, we do have our fair share of AI ML startups. I think AI ML may be a differentiator for Indian startups because we understand uh, this technology well. We understand how to process data much better than some of the other countries, and we are also sitting on a lot of data. We generate a lot of data, and there's a lot of historic data. So if you really want to use that to your advantage to build some solutions, train your models, and so on and so forth, I think we are in a very good place. So it's a good time to do startups, obviously, given where we are in the COVID situation. But generally, technology wise, data wise, we are in a very good position to do a lot of AI ML startups as well. Mahesh, hi Mahesh. Yeah, about T Angel. So, as you know, T Hub is an ecosystem builder, right? So when we try to answer the question for how do we bring in VCs to come into Hyderabad, uh, go back to the same uh, answer I was giving Raghav, I guess, dear, that you don't go to VCs directly. You need to build your way to the VCs. So what we did was we actually brought uh, about 30 best startups in the Hyderabad ecosystem to come into a program called T Angel. So what we did was these were guys who are almost there to raising angel money, and we said, you know, we there is this delta of things that you need to address. Maybe it is just getting your business model right, getting your pricing right, getting your team right, stuff like that. Or it could be something even more fundamental, like getting your presentation right, getting your financials right, and so on and so forth. So let's identify those gaps, and let's assign some mentors to you so that we can close those gaps and then present you in front of the angels. So that's what we have been doing. So we put our first set of 30 startups through the rigor, and 10 of them were ready to get term sheets before this COVID crisis started. So we'll see how it all ends up after this COVID crisis. But I think it was a phenomenal success for us because 10 would have raised money within about 6 months, and the remaining 20 would have raised it within 12 months. So these are great stories for us to talk about. But that's one side of it, Mahesh. On the flip side of it, we also took this opportunity to bring in a lot more investors, angel investors into the picture. So a lot of people do not know how to evaluate startups. They may be having a lot of money, they may be into real estate, manufacturing, or they just have money from the family. In fact, Mumbai Angels is a bunch of people who have come from very large business houses. The sons and daughters created Mumbai Angels, right? So similar to that, we wanted to get more and more people to become much more conversant with evaluating technology startups. So we run training for them. So we are working with startups to make them angel ready, and we're also training more angels to come into the ecosystem, and we give them an opportunity to participate in these syndicates, to invest in startups. So at some point in time, these new angels themselves can start taking the lead. But for now, they get to be part of a much larger pool of investors that are going into startups. So hopefully that answers your question. Um, Vikram, I registered PAN as an MSME online in 2016 and got Udyog Aadhaar number. Is it enough to say that I started a company? Am I eligible to offer internship? Can I use letterhead certificate to interns? Yeah, I mean, so there is no sanctity about whether you have to be legitimately as a company. Or maybe I don't understand the question very well. But if you do have opportunities to, one, give meaningful work to people and also pay them for the internship, make them valuable. Obviously, you can definitely do that. Um, what are some of the key parameters in the Global Innovation Index? Great question. Uh, I think the Global Innovation Index obviously looks at the number of patents that have been published, the number of research institutes that are working on different innovation pieces, how many startups are there in the ecosystem, and various other things. I think a lot of these, uh, Rajeshwari, I think are about how Europeans think about innovation and all that. There's nothing wrong in that, but I think there's a lot more to what meets the eye as far as Global Innovation Index is concerned, as especially when it applies to India. I think we are a very innovative bunch, especially when you start going into the hinterlands. Lots of things are happening there as well, but we don't necessarily capture that. Or for that matter, the kind of innovation that, let's say, Geo has come up with, the way they did business model innovation, got into the market, the way they were able to process um, many people to come onto the Geo network very, very quickly using Aadhaar. There are no very clear mechanisms to capture these kinds of innovations that a lot of our um, large corporates, not just startups, that are doing, to really say, okay, is this an innovation index worthy of capturing, or good enough to capture all the things that are happening? So there is that discussion happening. Professor Mashelkar is on the Global Innovation Index board. So a lot of that discussion will hopefully bring a lot more um, open ideas, or ideas about India and places like that, which offer innovation not just at the metro level or the tier one city level, but tier two, tier three city level as well. Um, the culture of innovation starts. This is Nikhil. The culture of innovation starts from building a scientific temper around natural curiosity one has. How to foster this early on in childhood? Great question. Um, yeah, you will see. I presented this in my presentation. Something called the Atal Tinkering Labs. So there are lots of these schools that have the Atal Tinkering Labs, where you get a chance to just go and tinker around, build something, you find a problem and you go ahead and start solving for it. So, it gives you a chance to, open up that curiosity. I was on a call about 2, 3 days ago over the weekend where a whole bunch of students were actually coming up with new solutions for the COVID issue that they see around them in their villages and so on and so forth. So, just participating in these kinds of hackathons, just opens your mind to the possibility. Our education system, unfortunately, does not foster that curiosity to the extent that it should, or not at all. Giving them and the opportunity to participate in hackathons. I was quite surprised when I did the PAN IIT hackathon about a year and a half ago in Delhi. We were very afraid that we will not get enough people to participate in the hackathon. But what I was very surprised to find was that there were a lot of students of IITs. At the same time, there were other alumni who for whom it was just a way of being. It's like, what do I do this weekend? Do I watch a Netflix movie, or do I go meet my friends, or do I just go participate in a hackathon? 48-hour hackathon and so on and so forth. So the way you think of this is, okay, here is some, here is an intellectual challenge. Here is a set of talent that I have, skills that I have in programming and so on. So can I actually utilize this, and is it a interesting thing for me to spend a weekend? And we were very, very surprised to see how people were looking at this. And the not so pleasant surprise for us was when we had selected some of the top companies to come to IIT Delhi to actually come and do the hackathon in person. They were not interested, because they said, "Oh, we were just doing this for the weekend. That's a great pastime for us. We did a great thing. I think it was good fun. I got to do this with an old classmate of mine, but going there and spending another 24 hours doing a on-site hackathon was not their way of enjoying. But what I should say is that even though we had some people dropping out, the people who did show up, really, really built something. And the VCs that came to judge this hackathon, they said they have never seen the kind of solutions that they saw at this hackathon. So, there is that curiosity that can be created through this kind of activity um, from the very early stages. So I'm actually a big proponent of telling schools to do hackathons every year. Just like they do annual day where they will have kids showcase their drama and their dance and their singing skills. They should also have the opportunity to show their problem solving skills. So that's the hackathon opportunity for them. Gomati Nayagam Somasundaram, do you think India has already had a paradigm shift from being IT services to IT product development? Um, I think we are getting there. When I started in 2006, talking about products was like, people used to just glaze their eyes. What is that about? Why do you think we don't have the talent to do something like that, and so on? But it does take a lot of keep lot of thinking about how do you triangulate. You have a certain technology that you want to build, the market is going to evolve, and all of that has to come together at the right time, at the right place, and that's when you really have a successful startup. or you keep doing course correction so that the triangulation it really becomes effective. That is not necessarily the way our technologists, our engineers were thinking when we were building those in the Infosys and Wipros and so on and so forth. But it's changing. It's definitely changing. We're looking at the kind of IT product companies that are coming up today. Uh, yeah, product companies that are coming up today. To the extent that there are people who are now doing their second or the third or the fourth startup. So you're beginning to see that they understand this whole business. So one of the things that I see amongst us IITians is we are very, very good at technology. So what do? We go directly into building technology and we say, okay, here is a solution. But when we ask them what's the problem that you're solving, you find it very hard to do to answer that question. So product management for me is something that ties together the solution and the problem, and that is done in consonance with the market, talking to customers and so on and so forth. So it's a new set of skill sets that is required for people to actually tie the technology and product and the market or the solutions and the problem. And that's what we were struggling with for a very long time. Product management skill sets, even in large MNCs and IT companies, were missing. Now we're beginning to see this as more and more mainstream. We haven't reached an inflection point yet, but given that there are 10,000 startups in India, we are the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. More and more MNCs are now setting up their offshore development centers in India. We're beginning to see that that's changing, and there are a lot of people who actually are investing in that as well. Program management, product management capabilities. Um, Rajeshwari, you have a third question. Is National Innovation Foundation of GOI doing good work? Well, I don't know. I am not very familiar with what they're doing. If this is the NITI Aayog thing, yeah, I think they have started uh, at least going through the process of creating an index and so on and so forth. Um, but again, people didn't know what the rules of the game were, so they were not able to play the game properly. So I think the first time around it was like just people sent the data that they had, but now what we are trying to do, especially at TSIC, for example, is they are saying, okay, if this is the rules of the game, this is how you win, then we'll start figuring out how best to make that happen. So what the Global Innovation Index is and what the Indian Innovation Index that Niti Aayog is talking about are a little different. But again, that is now kind of percolating, and people are beginning to understand how to play the innovation game. So that's beginning to happen more and more. And then we have Rajendran. Does THub restrict itself to some domains, or is it open to a wide variety of wide set of industry verticals? We don't restrict ourselves, Rajendran, especially in the early days, because in the early days we feel that if you're a technology startup, we obviously have enough and more to help you. But as you become, farther and farther along in your journey, then your demands are much more specific, that you want customers, you want VCs, you want mentors, and so on and so forth. So that kind of specialization starts happening slightly later in your journey. And when we want to answer for those questions, we find that we don't have enough of all the domains. So what we have done is we have chosen two verticals, which is healthcare and financial services. So these two areas is where we focus on, and then two horizontals. One is AI/ML. We call them advanced technologies, and the other one is IoT, where we find startups that are either employing these two technologies to build solutions, or we start concentrating on startups that are either in financial services or in healthcare. Um, Raj Tilak, what is the bank ability for startups? Corporates are handling this issue. Bankability of startups. Unfortunately, banks don't believe much in startups beyond a certain point. They are always looking for collaterals. If it's a technology startup that you're alluding to, so they need collateral to make any, give you any loans. Things may be changing now with the crisis that is there. So some of the same things that they were making up available to MSME, trying like the CGT, MSC's loans, we're trying to see if that is also available to startups. But beyond that, banks are fairly conservative and they want to make sure that there are no NPAs on their books as much as they can. Subir, I have a lot of passion to innovate things, innovate products, considering the current global conditions. In my own condition, I'm a bit hesitant to take it up as a full-time profession. Could you suggest ways based on your experience? Yeah, so this is Shantakumar. Yeah, so Shantakumar, I would say that what I talked to you about earlier, the IIT MA program. So obviously they're looking for full-time fellows, but at the same time they're also open to some ways in which you can contribute, but not going there full-time. Either because there is somebody that you know who's reaching out to you for help, or you can be on the platform, in making that happen. So I would suggest that you take a look at the IIT MA site for this particular program, and you may be able to contribute even without leaving your current full-time position. Rashmi is asking about, are we linked, related to Startup India? Yes, we are related in the sense, it's a central government initiative, the DPIIT Startup India. We do a lot of capacity building work for them. So a lot of the incubator managers under the DPIIT program, we train them at THub. So that association is there. But while THub is based in Hyderabad and promoted by the state of Telangana, DPIIT Startup India is a central government initiative. Um, to involve to do you, okay, Achyutan is asking, do you feel it is not advisable not to involve students on innovation and entrepreneurship during educational period, but only to limit only to exposing the idea of entrepreneurship? Achyutan, I am a firm believer that education should involve a lot of these things, innovation, entrepreneurship. It's not something that you can teach. It is it's a mindset that you have to create, either through hackathons or various other things. So I feel it's up to you to look at this as either as a distraction or as an asset, because I feel going forward, especially those that are now graduating out of IITs, you will find it very very different from the way I found it. For example, when I graduated from IIT, I probably had about 6 or 8 different roles: entrepreneur, corporate employee, and so on and so forth. But also I did various different things. But I think a lot of the students that are graduating now will probably have 5 to 6 times more variations in their career. They may have to rethink their entire career path so many times. Skill sets that they need to pick up are various. But the one thing that will actually string this through is the mindset with which you arrive into this education process. Because if you have the curiosity, you have the entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial mind or an innovative mind, no matter what, you will find very very interesting projects to work on. You will find therefore a great career path for yourself, and also lucrative one, I would hope. But at the same time, you will find things to places to actually learn from. So let's say some of the problems that you're trying to solve for requires you to learn certain elements in math, certain elements in computer science, some certain elements in biology. and something related to, let's say, a COVID problem that you are trying to do. Obviously, you first of all would not have even considered that you can be solving this problem in the first place, because you're working for some IT company, or you're doing well, everything seems to be fine. But the very fact that you say, why the hell has nobody actually thought about solving this problem, and why haven't they considered this as a solution? And when you become the owner of creating that solution, you will find pathways to actually finding the answers. You may go to a MOOC to find the answers. You may go to Udemy or Coursera or Udacity, whatever. You'll find the information, you learn about it, then you start applying it and actually creating solutions, because all new um, ways of solving problems going forward is going to be at the confluence of various different disciplines, like I just mentioned, math and computer science and biology. So it's not going to be one thing that you have learned, you're scored well, and then you're done. I think it's much more than that. So creating innovation mindset within the education is absolutely essential. Whether you make it into a course or you make it into some other mechanism, it's up to you. But I think it's really very important, because that is what creates good employability, good engagement with the new economy, the innovation economy that we will be getting into, more and more as we go along. I will take maybe just one more question, and then I will stop. Let's see what else is there. Based on COVID issues, Gautami is asking again. Based on the COVID issues, robotics, can they make big enabler in future epidemics management? I would suspect so, of course. Um, Here's another question through Chutan. Okay, this will be the last one. Are you focusing only on Telangana? No, uh, we definitely are obviously going to give first priority to those startups that are emerging in Telangana, making sure that they are on a solid path to prosperity. But also, we feel that the way we are going about creating this ecosystem in the state of Telangana, in the city of Hyderabad, obviously we are making sure that other people find it interesting enough for them to come work with us. So earlier I was talking about T Angel. There was another program, uh, like Lab 32 and others, or TSIC for that matter. When we invite fellows, there are people coming in from all over the country, because they feel that there's the right environment for them to thrive, to learn, to prosper. So we do, invite people from outside to come in as well and work in Telangana. I hope that has answered your questions, given you some insights into this very new emerging opportunity that is available to all of you. When you want to get involved, and what extent you want to get involved, it's completely up to you. But I think we are very fortunate that we have come upon this at the right time, and COVID will completely change what was status quo before we entered about a month and a half ago. It'll open up completely new opportunities, not just in India but across the world. And if you are embarking on building a startup, this is a great time. If you're looking to create a fund, this is a great time. If you're looking to get into actually helping, making an impact, because lots of people will be looking for that kind of help, this is a great time. I think this is a unique moment in history that we are part of, to really make major leap for ourselves in our career, in our lives, but also for India. So I'm very excited. Thank you for being part of this webinar.